Welcome to the second of this year's Caversham lectures, and in introducing Rachel Zajac, Rachel and I know each other because we both serve on the board of Selwyn College and have done one or two interesting pieces of work together, which has sort of brought us closer together. And I remember once going to visit Rachel in the psychology department of Otago University. It's a very glamorous building, so unlike the Burns building. And I asked where Rachel's office was, and a young student on the ground floor, and she said, "Oh, Rachel Zajac, she's a wonderful lecturer, a great communicator." And I reported these words to Rachel as I came to her office. She's like, "I paid her to stand there and say that." But in fact, as I'm about to read her bio details, that is not true. She has an award for this. Rachel is an associate professor in the psychology department at the University of Otago, where she also trained as a clinical psychologist. She lectures in both child development and in forensic psychology, and last year was awarded a national award for tertiary teaching excellence. In her research, Rachel studies the psychological factors involved in the investigation of crime. She focuses on children's and adults' eyewitness testimony, social influences on memory and decision-making, and biases in the interpretation of forensic evidence. Rachel is the co-director of the Innocence Project New Zealand and is closely involved with the New Zealand Police, where she regularly contributes to benchmarking practice, procedural review and training. Rachel's research has been used in police and judicial education programs in the UK and Australia and in the US Supreme Court as scientific evidence. And this, reinforces my conviction that as you begin your academic career, much depends on your skill and wisdom in choosing that which you will specialise in and its future attractiveness and usefulness. And my goodness, you have chosen very well, Rachel, and we're looking forward to this lecture very much.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Hugh. Okay, so I called my talk "When Justice Goes Wrong, Identifying and Preventing Wrongful Conviction." So when I talk about wrongful conviction, I'm talking about what sometimes is called miscarriages of justice, when the justice system gets it wrong. So you can probably all think of some famous cases. We'll talk about some of those. I'm not really going to talk about New Zealand cases, but question time, you can ask me if you want. I don't have inside knowledge that I can give you about any of these ones you're going to ask me about, but we can talk about some of the issues anyway. So as Hugh said, I'm not a police officer, I'm not a lawyer, and so it may seem odd that I'm talking about wrongful conviction, but this will become more clear why a psychologist is talking to you about this as we go on. I'm not sure how long this talk is. I'll try and make it about 50 minutes. But the nice thing about a small audience is we can speed up and slow down. So please tell me if you want to spend longer on something or you want me to keep going, and if I'm labouring a point too hard, or if you want me to go to something again, very happy to do that. Okay, so I'm going to start off by introducing you to these two. And every time I look at this photo, I think it's Simon and Garfunkel. It looks like Simon and Garfunkel. But it's not. This is Peter Neufeld on the left and Barry Scheck on the right. And they're very famous in my little sphere of the world because in 1992, they implemented what we now know as the Innocence Project in New York. And the aim of the original Innocence Project in New York was to free wrongfully convicted people, to identify wrongful convictions based on DNA. So you'll know DNA can tell us who's who, but it hasn't actually been used for that long. And one thing you'll know about Americans is that they give people very, very long sentences. So when they're convicted of something and they get life, it actually means life. And sometimes they get concurrent sentences that add up to sort of 300 years and that kind of thing that no one has a hope of living through. So what that actually meant was that there were lots of people who were sitting in jail in the US who had DNA evidence involved in the crime they were convicted for, but it wasn't tested at the time because the technology wasn't there. So we've only been doing DNA testing since the 80s. So a lot of these people who were in jail, there was DNA, there was blood, there were things like that that were being stored that hadn't been tested. And so what would happen with the Innocence Project is that someone who was incarcerated, who was in prison, who maintained their innocence, would write to these guys and say, I didn't do it. I've been convicted, but I didn't do this crime. And these guys would do a bit of digging around, and if they thought that it was a case that actually did seem like it had quite a few problems with it, they would fundraise to go and find that DNA and test it. Okay, so it's sitting on shelves in police departments and courts and things like that. And what eventually ended up happening was that in about 30 to 40% of those cases, the DNA test showed that the wrong person was in prison. Now, I don't want you to think that in 30 to 40% of cases of people who were in prison that they're innocent. These were a selected bunch of cases. They were selected based on these guys going, I think there are some real problems with these cases. But the ones that they took on, they found that about 30 to 40% of them, it was indeed the wrong person in prison. Okay. So I've got, just to show you, because I think it's nice to see a sort of a human face to this, just a random selection of people that I took off the Innocence Project website. And I've just given you how long they were in prison. Okay, and so these are all people who have been conclusively shown using DNA to be innocent. Okay, so as I said, Americans get very long sentences for things. So you can see, well, we can see some gender biases and some racial biases here, but you know, there are a whole range of people. This guy down here, Ted Bradford, I always stick him into everything because I've met him, I've met some of these guys, but Ted Bradford's my age, and which is older than I would like. But you know, I always sort of looked at him and thought, this is a decent chunk of, you know, it's easy for me to say, wow, that's that much of your life. So anyway, these are just some of the cases. So the Innocence Project now, so it's not just in New York now, it's right around the world. And as Hugh said when he introduced me, we do have a New Zealand Innocence Project. Maybe we can talk about that later. But the Innocence Projects in the US have now freed, since 1992, 351. That was as of yesterday. There might be another one today, but 351 people have been identified using DNA as being wrongfully convicted. So it's quite staggering, really. So great thing about the Innocence Project, of course, the number one obvious thing about the Innocence Project that's wonderful is that these people get released from prison. So here are some of the photos of some of these people. You can see, if you remember Barry Sheck, there he is, he seems to pop up everywhere, but lots of attorneys involved now in these cases. So that's the number one great thing, that people get taken out of prison when they shouldn't have been there in the first place. The other really great thing about the Innocence Project is that it lets us go back and look at what went wrong. Okay, so we've got someone who was in prison, shouldn't have been there, now they've been identified as having been wrongfully convicted. Why did they get in there in the first place? What was it that happened that led them to end up in prison? And so we can use these cases, we can go back and we can look at what the evidence was. Okay, so I'm going to show you now the most common contributors to wrongful conviction. And I think a lot of the time when I talk to people about this, they immediately think about shady cops. They think about people planting evidence and, you know, lads saying we've done this test and it's shown this when actually it showed that and that kind of thing. And yes, misconduct, actual misconduct does come into this a bit. But if you look at some of the biggest contributors, they're actually firmly in my wheelhouse. They're in the wheelhouse of psychological scientists. Because here they are. The biggest one by far is mistaken identification. Okay? So in about 75% of these wrongful conviction cases, a witness, or sometimes 3 or 4 witnesses, pointed at that person and said, that's the one. Okay? And that kind of evidence is super powerful, it's super persuasive. Because when you think about things like fingerprints or bullet casings or that kind of thing, they're circumstantial. Okay, your fingerprints put you at the scene of a crime, but they don't say anything about that you actually did it, right? Someone actually pointing out someone and saying, that's the guy who attacked me, or that's the guy who shot this other person, that's very, very, very persuasive to jurors and to judges and to police officers. Okay? So the number one contributor to these wrongful convictions is witness identification. Okay? So that's the first one, that's the big one that comes up a lot of the time. The second biggest thing that we see here is faulty forensics. So I think like if you watch the TV shows, the CSI and SVU and all those kinds of things, we kind of think now that we can just pick up a cigarette butt from a rubbish bin and do the DNA on it and get the fingerprint and feed it into our machines and it'll spit out a driver's license and we know who does something. That's all very nice to think, but the reality of forensic science is that it's not perfect, and any decision that's made by a human is not perfect, and all of these decisions are still made by humans. As much as we love to think there are machines that analyse things, the final decision is always made by a human. Okay, so when I say faulty forensics, I mean in the way that things are tested, but mostly the way in which forensic results are interpreted. The way in which people look at them and go, oh, that means this, and the way that they're presented in court. So that contributes to about 47% of wrongful convictions. You can go back and you could go, oh, this evidence never should have been presented in this way. And the final one here, which is still a decent chunk, it's 25%, is false confessions. So in 25% of those cases, when someone has been conclusively shown to be wrongfully convicted, they actually confess to the crime. And we love to think that we wouldn't confess to a crime we didn't commit. Why would you do that? But I'll talk to you about that later. And people do. Okay, so those three big guys, and they add up to more than 100%, because in a lot of these cases, it's multiple problems. Okay, there's some forensic problems, there's a witness who points someone out, there's a false confession. A lot of times these are all linked up. The witness knows that the person's confessed, so they're more likely to pick them out. So they're all interrelated. But these tend to be the big guns in wrongful conviction. And as I said, they're all firmly in the wheelhouse of psychology, because they're about memory, they're about decision making, they're about persuasion, and those are all things that psychological scientists are interested in. So that's how come I'm talking to you today. Okay, so I want to go through each of these individually and just talk a bit about what goes wrong. Why are witnesses mistaken so often? What's the problem with forensic science? Why do people confess to things that they never did? Okay, so we'll go through and I'll give you some examples. Okay, so here's the first lesson. There are 3 lessons. So this is very manageable, these take-home lessons. The first one is that eyewitness evidence is prone to error. Right? And the best way for me to show you how hard it is to be an eyewitness is to give you an example and make you all do it. Okay. So this isn't a video. This is just a sort of a closed-circuit television shot of someone. But let's say, shortly after the security footage was taken, this man shot and killed a service station attendant. Can you identify him from a lineup? So I'm going to give you a lineup, police lineup, you'll know this from TV shows and things, a number of people, and you have to see if you can identify them. Are you ready? Have a good look at him. I know it's not the best quality, but you're actually really privileged in terms of being witnesses, because I'm telling you it's important, which a lot of the time witnesses don't know. They don't know that what they say is going to end up being important. I'm giving you as long as you like. You're not stressed or anything, so you should be able to, no pressure, but you should be able to do this. Okay, so there he is. Okay, you ready for the lineup? Okay. So have a good look at it, and don't yell out what you think, because I will ask you in a minute, but it sort of spoils it if people are talking to each other. So have a good look at everyone there. And I'll do a show of hands, and you're not a massive audience, but I bet we get some variation. And you're lucky because you've got them front and side. Not all lineups have front and side. Okay. Are you ready to make your choices known? Hands up who thinks it's number 1. Quite often we get no one saying it's number one, and I think part of that is because no one wants to own anything at this time, but partially maybe because you feel like he looks less like the person. Okay, hands up who thinks it might be number 2. Alright, there's a few of you. Yep, number 3. Okay, number 4. Number 5. Alright, so except for number 1, we actually had people, I think, in every category there. So I guess that's maybe my first point, is that this task is just really hard. And if I was going to talk to you for hours and hours and hours, I'd tell you exactly why it's hard, but we don't have time for that. So that's my first point, is that it's hard. Here's my second point. He's not actually there, right? Now, so you're sitting there going, women psychologists, they always play tricks on us. I haven't played a trick on you. This is a situation that arises in pretty much all of those wrongful conviction cases, and there's a very simple explanation for it. Okay, so let me tell you how police actually make a lineup. When a crime is committed, the police go, right, we need to go and find who did it, okay? And so they do all their investigating, and they hopefully come up with this person here, who we will call a suspect. Now the clue is in the title. This person is a suspect, right? They may or may not be the person who actually committed the crime, but the police are pretty sure that they are. Okay. So what they do with the lineup is they get, often it's photographs, a photograph of the suspect, and then they have to bulk out the lineup. And they do that with these people that we call foils. Okay, so one of the first kind of misconceptions about lineups is that people think that everyone in the lineup is under suspicion, right? That's not the case. That is, very occasionally there will be more than one suspect in the lineup, but in the vast majority of lineups, there is one suspect, and there are all these other people that the police know have done nothing wrong. Okay, they're called foils. Police know that they're innocent. Okay, so sometimes they get people who are in jail at the time of the crime, so they know they haven't done anything. Sometimes they get other police officers to be foils. But regardless of how they do it, they always find people who didn't commit the crime. Right? Does that make sense so far? Okay, so you've got one suspect, and then you've got these foils. Right. So, your job is, as a witness, is to pick out if the target, the offender, is there. Now, if the suspect is guilty, right, so that's what police are hoping, right? They're hoping they've got the right person. So your task as a witness is to pick that person out, to say that's the person. Right? If you pick a foil, and you say, oh, it's that one, police know you've made an error, because they know all those guys are innocent. So they go, thank you very much, and they roll their eyes behind your back, and they go, all right, see you later, right? You know how to tell us what's there. Okay, if you pick this guy here, he gets in trouble, because he is the suspect. Okay, but it's fine for him to get in trouble, right? Because he's guilty. Alright. What if the police have got the wrong suspect? Well, they've got the right suspect, but they've got the wrong person, it's not the offender. Okay, so they've gone out and they've done their digging, and they've come up with the wrong person. Right? And if that person is innocent, everyone in the lineup is innocent. Right? Does that make sense? We've got no one in this lineup who is the offender. Because these guys are all innocent, they always are, and this is the wrong person. Okay. Now, if you're a witness and you get presented with this, your job is to say, he's not there. Right? But we know, and I know from you guys, that people really are driven to pick someone. Right? So what you probably did when I gave you this, is you tried to find the person who looked most like the person who you saw in that close security footage, right? That's what you did, and you probably went, like a multi-choice question, you probably went, oh, it's not that guy, it's not that guy, it's between those two, you pick the person who looked most like a person. What you should be doing when you do a lineup is you should look at each person and go, is it him or not? Right? And then the next person, is it him or not? Right? Rather than comparing them all to each other. Because if you compare them all to each other, you're going to pick someone. So this is the situation that gets these people into prison when they shouldn't be there. Okay. I'll tell you a story. This happened in 1984. So you can go onto the Innocent Project website and you can read about every single individual case, you can read about what went wrong. I always talk about this case because, well, you know about it, I was going to tell you my little story. But this is Jennifer Thompson, and she was a college student in 1984. And she was in her apartment, her house by herself. She was in bed, and she heard a noise, and she saw someone slip past the side of the bed, put a knife to her throat, and she offered him anything, money, you can take my car, whatever you like, just to go. And he said, I don't want your money, and she knew that she was going to be sexually attacked. She was. Now, the thing about Jennifer Thompson is that she went, right, if this guy's going to do this to me, I am going to identify him. So she was actually an interesting witness in that rather than going to pieces, which is what we would expect a witness to do, a victim, she studied him. She studied him within an inch of his time. So she actually manipulated him. She said, can we go over here? She turned the stereo on so it would cast a light onto his face. And she was just looking at him. Does he have a scar? Does he have an accent? What are his eyes like? What is his nose like? And she was just studying and studying and studying. Eventually, she managed to get away. She said she was going to get him a drink. And she managed to escape. He fled the house and actually raped another woman that night. That's kind of, it is important to the story, but if you forget it, don't worry about it. So anyway, she goes down to the police, or she goes to hospital, and the police meet her down there. She said, I studied him. I'm going to get him because I looked at him. Anyway, I'll go way over time if I keep telling really long stories. But she did an identity picture, got the thing where you go through the noses and the eyes and you piece together a likeness, and people started talking about this guy in the neighbourhood called Wrongful. And Wrongful came into the police station to clear his name, and he gave an alibi for that night. She said, no, I was actually doing this, and what it was. And unfortunately, he made a mistake and he got his weekend muddled up. And the police took that as a sign of being a dodgy person and being offended. But he actually just got mixed up. Anyway, cut a long story short, Jennifer Thompson picked him out of a lineup, a photo lineup, and then she was presented with a live lineup. She picked him out again, and he went to prison. Now, while he was in prison, years and years later, a new inmate came in by the name of Bobby Paul. And Wrongful looked at Bobby Paul and he said, man, he looks like that identical that they made of me. And people were muddling him up in prison, calling one of them Paul, one of them Paul, and on the ground. And he went to talk to Bobby Paul and he said, you really look like this person that's suspected in this crime that I've been convicted for. Did you do it? And he said, no. As you would. Anyway, I'm bridging this. Wrongful won a new trial. So he managed to get enough evidence. I've got them both together. Yes, here we go. Here's Wrongful on the left, here's Bobby Paul on the right. Wrongful was concerned enough about Bobby Paul that he thought, I've got to tell my lawyer about this. And to do that, he needed a photo of the two of them together. And generally, if you say, hey, I think that you did this crime that I'm committed, I'm going to take a photo of you for my lawyer, people would say no. So he said, my sister came in to visit me and she thought you were quite hot and that's how that photo was taken. Anyway, won a new trial, right? So now we all go, excellent, this is going to be resolved. And so Jennifer Thompson's in court, Bobby Paul is in court. Wrongful is in court, they get Bobby Paul to stand up, they say to Jennifer Thompson, and she says, no, it's not him, it's Wrongful. How dare you doubt me? Right? I remember him. How dare you think that I'm going to forget what my rapist looked like? She was just disgusted. Okay, but she still saw this person in her mind. So, and by that stage, the other victim, remember I said the other victim, it's not a major part, but it's just a really frustrating part of the story, is that at the time of the attack, she said, I just can't, I've got nothing, I can't identify him. But in the second trial, she stood up and she said, it's Ronald. Right? So he actually came out for his new trial. He went back into jail for 2 life sentences. And so that was all terrible. And then later on, so again, it's a long time period going on here, but then later on, Ron Cotton was watching the O.J. Simpson trial in prison on the television, and he heard about DNA. And he contacted his lawyer and said, is there any chance there would be DNA? And his lawyer said, well, you know, we can look, but this is going to cut both ways. You know, it could show that you are the offender, and if that's the case, then it doesn't matter what kind of legal argument you make, you're staying here the rest of your life, and he needs to go for it, you need to do it. So they found DNA, and they tested it, and it was Bobby Bull. He wasn't wrong quite at all. So he served 11 years, and then he got out. Now, there's a lot of really interesting things about that story, I think. One of the most amazing is that they became friends. Okay, so Jennifer Thompson was told that actually she identified the wrong person, and then he got to jail for 11 years. And she said, well, they meet with me because I need to talk to him. And now the two of them are very good friends and travel the US talking about reform for how we collect title and evidence. It's an amazing story. They actually wrote a book together called Picking Cotton. And they wrote, it's lovely. And they wrote a chapter about, so Jennifer writes a chapter and Ron writes a chapter, and they go right through exactly what happened. And it's really great if you wanted to know more about this case. Okay, so eyewitnesses are actually astoundingly unreliable. So what do we do about it? The first thing we do is that we improve our procedures for interviewing witnesses. And in 2005, I was invited to be part of the police review of how we interview witnesses, suspects, and victims. And based on that, we completely overhauled the way that police interview. They were pretty much flying by the seat of their hands, and the methods that they were using to question people were actually the ones that we know promote error. So I'm not going to go into any more detail on that because we're just all running out of time. But I think I'm involved in a lot of the training for the police in terms of the ones that want to be investigators in serious crimes, like sexual assault, homicide, that kind of thing. They have to go through this accreditation procedure, and we teach them the right way to get information so that they don't promote error. So that's interviewing, that's people telling you about what happened, but most of the mistakes that we see are made during our identification procedures. So that's another area that we enjoy. We don't use a lot of lineups in New Zealand. The US is all the time, and as you can see, they are very problematic. There are a number of things we can do to lineups to make the evidence that comes out of them more reliable. One of them is do something that we call sequential lineups. So when I showed you that lineup, the gas station guy, I showed you what we call a simultaneous lineup because I showed you them all at once, right? And then you all kind of compare them. You did that thing that I don't want you to do, which is it's either that one or that one, and it's not that one. We don't want you to be doing that because that's what makes you make errors. What we should be doing is what we call a sequential lineup, which is show you the people one at a time, so you can't compare them. And in a sequential lineup, you don't tell the witness how many people they're going to see. Right? So you don't say, I'm going to show you 6 people, because then they're just going to be heterogeneous, right? So you don't tell them how many they're going to see, and as soon as they make an identification, you stop. Right? So they don't get to see the other people. And that's a lot more reliable, gives you a lot more accurate identifications. So people are trying to use sequential lineups. One of the things we don't have time to get into lots of detail about it, that's really important is how you select those foils. What are those foils meant to look like? Right? So if I go out and get my suspect and he looks a certain way, who do I choose to be those people that fill out the lineup? And that's really important. So just to give you what you think is a crazy example, but unfortunately isn't a crazy example, say a victim comes in and says that she's been attacked, and you say, is it her attack? And you say, tell me what the person looked like. Oh no, that's all right, it's a blank slide. And you say, tell me what the person looked like, and they say, well, he had no hair, shaved head, and he was African American, right? And you go out and you get the suspect, the shaved headed African American guy, and you put him in the line, right? He's your suspect. And then you get the dog now, right, with these foils. Would you do that? No. Well, people have done it, right? So this has happened, and I'm actually meeting the guy who spent 25 years in prison because he was a black suspect in a white lineup. And the investigators in this case said, oh, it's a cross-section of the Minneapolis society. That's not how you make a lineup, right? But there's a lot, again, there's like hours and hours of me telling you how to construct a lineup. And actually the New Zealand Evidence Act has it wrong. Anyway, that's another story for another day. But it's really, hopefully that is to show you that it's actually really important who we choose to be these fillers. Because if the suspect sits out like a sore thumb, they're going to get picked, even if they're innocent. Right? So that's important. So force selection, very important. Double blind lineups, it's really important that the person who administers the lineup, so the investigator, doesn't know which one the suspect is. Because we know that they can transmit all sorts of cues. They can be verbal cues, they can be non-verbal cues, that influence what we discuss. Okay, so if the witness is looking at a certain person and the cop's sitting there smiling, they're going to take that person. So there's lots of issues with that too. So where possible, the police hate this because what it means is that some other detective has to come in who knows nothing about the case and there are resourcing issues and all sorts of things. But really, to get the most reliable results, they should be done blind. Research, really important, right? Just a little spoiler. Every time I talk to you about one of these lessons, I'm going to say research is really important because it keeps you in a job. But it is really, we're still learning what can go wrong and how we can improve it. So research is very, very important. Okay, so that's the statement of identification. You're right, is the pace okay? I waffle a little bit, but I think we're going to be okay at the time. Okay, so that's the statement of identification. The second lesson that I want you to learn here tonight is that people do confess to things they didn't do. And remember I said that when you look at these wrongfully convicted people, 25% of them had actually confessed. Okay, so why would people confess? To things that they didn't do. If I was to distill this massive area down into this much, there are 3 types of false confession. Okay. The first type of confession is what we call, and the clue is always in the title here, a voluntary false confession. So these are people that confess to crimes with no coercion whatsoever. Not the good cop, bad cop, tell us the truth kind of thing. These are just people who rock up to the police station and say, I did it, but they're wrong. Okay, and they didn't do it. Okay, so lots of examples of that I could give you. The one I'm going to give you was in 1932, the famous aviator Charles Lindbergh. His little toddler was kidnapped. And unfortunately the child was killed quite soon after this happened. But there were all sorts of ransom demands and things like that. The child was actually already dead. But that's how it unfolded. Now the reason I tell you this one is that 200 people confessed to that crime. So the 200 people came forward and said, it's me, I'm the person you're looking for, which is interesting. Because in likelihood 199 of them at least are wrong, and possibly 200 of them are wrong. I'm not going to focus on this kind of confession. It's, as you might guess, very much associated with things like mental illness. Sometimes people confess to other people, mothers confess to children. Sometimes people have committed a crime at some point in their life and they haven't got, paid for it. and later on they'll confess to a different crime because they'll have this kind of need to be punished for what they did. So there's all sorts of things that are wound up in this. But usually when we're talking about these kind of wrongful convictions, because usually you can roll these out. You know, if someone turns out and says, I did it, and you look at them and you're like, no, you didn't. Because you know you don't live next to there, you weren't there, and all those kinds of things. So they're quite easy to kind of rule out. The problem is when someone is actually suspected of doing something, and they're interviewed and they confess, and it's a false confession. So the first type of coerced confession that we need to talk about is, we call it a coerced compliant confession. And all that means is that one, it's coerced, so it's dragged out of them, and second, it's compliant, which in my kind of sphere means you confess but you don't believe it, right? So you say, I'm just going to say I did it, and then we'll sort it out later. And this is the majority of these ones that happen in these wrongful conviction cases. I don't know if you read about the Central Park jogger case. It was in 1989 when Central Park was not a good place to be. But this woman here, Tricia Miley, who was she was a baker. She used to go for a job in Central Park in the evenings, and this particular evening she was jogging and she was attacked. And it was incredible that she survived. She was attacked so brutally. They thought she was dead when they found her, and she still has a lot of problems. But she didn't die. But she was, of course, in no state to give any kind of interview. They didn't know she was alive. So what the police did is they swooped Central Park, and they found a whole lot of young African American guys who were in the park, right? And engaged in things like petty crime, not this kind of thing, but up to no good, basically. And they got 5 of them, and they questioned them all within an inch of their lives, and they all ended up confessing to this crime. They didn't all know each other, but what the police did is they fed them details of the crime. They interrogated them for a really long time. They didn't, give them access to food and water and things like that. They got all these kinds of things that bring your mind when you think about horrible interrogations. And by the end of it, I think 4 of them did a videotaped confession, and one said, I'm not going to be videotaped, and they all went to prison. And this is another one of those cases. But the interesting thing was, at the time, because this was in the 80s and they were already doing DNA testing, they got DNA from Tricia Miley and they tested it, and it came up as none of these 5 guys. And instead of going, we might have the wrong guys, the police said, there must have been 6 of you and we only got 5. So this is the kind of television that we see in a lot of these cases. So actually at the time, if they had compared that DNA to another guy that they'd caught doing exactly the same kind of thing at the same time, they wouldn't have had this problem. But they didn't do that, and this is some of the decision-making problems that we see. Anyway, years later, they spent, I think, between about 5 and 13 years, depending on they all got different sentences, in prison, and they were all eventually released. But they did test the DNA and find that it was someone who they already knew about. I think Donald Trump still thinks these guys are real name. It's a whole different story. So these are confessions that are false. The person doesn't believe it. So all these guys did their confession on a videotape or a signed confession, and as soon as they walked out of an interrogation room, they said, I confessed to get out of this situation, but I didn't do it, right? So that's sort of maybe like compliant. The other type of coerced confession that sometimes we see, and it's not as common, is what's called a coerced internalised confession. And what that is a false confession that the person actually believes. So the person winds up believing that they committed the crime. Whereas in this kind of case, they would say, I didn't do it, I just confessed, but they wouldn't have been out, or they'd been there for 12 hours or that kind of thing. So
So just to give you an example, this guy's interestingly named Tom Sawyer, but it was in the 80s, it was in North Carolina. Tom Sawyer was, he was an alcoholic. He had severe social anxiety. So social anxiety is when people find it very difficult to engage socially because they're very, very anxious about what people think. And so he lived in this gated community, and in the same gated community, a woman was found murdered. And what the police did is they went around talking to their landlord, and they knocked on Tom Sawyer's door, and he came to the door and saw the police and just started sweating profusely, as you would if you had social anxiety. And the police thought, this is kind of interesting, and it makes them look a bit suspicious, so they brought him in and questioned him. And then they manipulated him a bit, so they said, hey, you really like this, and he loved these crime shows, he was really into it, didn't have the greatest intellectual function, but he really loved crime shows and the sort of whodunit type things. And so the police actually said to him, hey, how about you come in and help us with this case, because you know the stuff we want you to tell you. And so they came in. And then it very quickly turned from you helping us out to we're accusing you of this crime. And what they tried to convince Tom Sawyer of is that he had committed the crime in an alcoholic blackout. Okay, so he's an alcoholic, and so they said, we think that you've done this, but you don't remember it because of all drinking. What else did I need to say about that? I need to tell you an interesting thing about these internalised false convictions. The false convictions that people actually believe in themselves that they might have done it. They all involve two things. The first is some kind of witness suspect vulnerability, low IQ, anxiety, being interrogated for 15 hours in a row, not being allowed to eat, being young, intellectual disability, those kinds of things that we call vulnerabilities. So they all involve that. The other thing they all involve is the presentation of false evidence. Now, this isn't allowed in New Zealand. And in New Zealand, thank goodness, they have to be straight up with you. And in the US, and this is still the case in the US, they're allowed to lie to suspects. Okay, so they're allowed to say, we've got your fingerprints on the gun, or we've got your DNA at the scene, or 6 witnesses have already told us that you fired the gun. So they're allowed to do that, and they're still allowed to do it. So when you get these kind of relatively rare cases of internalised convictions, they are this combination of a very vulnerable witness and a witness that's being presented with false evidence. So I can't really know what that false evidence was with Tom Sawyer, but I think maybe that time when he failed his lie detector test, when actually he passed an actually lie detector test. It's another lecture. So here's a little bit from the transcript of one of Tom's interviews. So this is towards the sort of end of the interrogation. I honestly believe I didn't do it, and I was never in there. Police, is that what you really believe? Tom, that's what I really, truly, honestly believe, and I pray to God if I did do it, I hope I'm punished for it. So you can see he's starting to kind of turn, he's not too sure. Police, be straight with me right now. Are you positive you didn't do it in your own mind right now? And he says, not right now, I'm not. So he's actually kind of to believe that he did it. Now the good thing in this case was that the judge in this case looked at that transcript and went, there is no way that this is admissible because look at the way that they questioned it. But that doesn't always happen. So he wasn't convicted. He didn't end up going to trial. So that's good. Okay, so what do we do about the problem of false convictions? Well, of course, we need to look really closely at the way that investigators interview suspects. No lying. I don't know if the US will ever change this. It's never been the case in New Zealand that you can lie to a suspect. But this would, when they do this kind of test in the laboratory, when we get people in, we know if they've committed the crime or not, when we question them in a similar way, everyone sort of knows the truth. If you start lying to them, they'll drop like flies. They do confess to things that they didn't do. So it's really important that you don't lie to suspects. Even over and above the lying to suspects, we need to think about the style of an interview. There's a very influential technique for interrogating suspects called the Rarity technique. They use it a lot in the US. We don't use it. It's the kind of good cop, bad cop thing that you might have sort of heard about, right? So you've got someone sitting there going, you did a bad thing. And you've got the other person going, hey, calm down, my colleague's a bit angry. We know that if you did do it, it was probably because, this, and they give them kind of face-saving alternatives and things like that. So there's these ways, I was going to say tried and true, but they're tried and terrible ways of interviewing people that we just shouldn't be using. The New Zealand police, if you're interested, they used to what we call front foot the evidence. So when they did interviews with suspects, they used to come in and say, look, we've got all this evidence here that says that you did it, right? Not lying, just actually front-footing it, saying, here's the evidence. And usually what would happen is the suspect would clam up and go, no, I didn't do it, and they'd never get anything from them. What they do these days in New Zealand is they just do a really good witness interview with them. They say, tell me everything that happened, from the start to the end, don't miss anything out. And then they get them to elaborate and all these good techniques that we use with witnesses. And then only right at the end of the interview do they say, well, you said this, but we've got this. And it's actually a lot more effective at getting true confessions, but also avoiding the false ones. I saw a great one once where, I won't go into the details of the case, but it rested on some text messages. I think it was a sexual assault thing and it was a consent issue. And the guy just has been interviewed by a female detective, and he just kept saying, if only you had my text records, because then you'd see that this, and she's like, yeah, that's a bit of a pain, and she just kept him talking for like an hour, and he just kept on saying, if only you had my text records. And then right at the end, she just pulled them out. She just pulled out this big stack of his entire text history. And he just went, I'm screwed. and he just confessed. It was quite lovely, actually. So that's what we do now, and it's a lot safer in terms of getting confessions that are true and avoiding confessions that are false. We need to identify these vulnerable suspects. So sometimes suspects with vulnerabilities say they don't need a lawyer, right? So they go, I didn't do it, so I don't need a lawyer. And this is what I tell my students: if you take one thing home, if you're wrongfully suspected of a crime, you do need a lawyer, actually. People think that asking for a lawyer will make them look guilty. I need a lawyer. You need a lawyer, right? You have to have a lawyer with you. So we need to make sure that these vulnerable suspects have lawyers with them as a matter of course. That's really important. We need to record all of the suspect interviews, because what happens in some of these wrongful conviction cases is they're questioned for 4 or 5 hours, and by the end of it they're so exhausted, and they know that there's no way out except to make this false confession, and they've been fed all these details. And so when you look at just the confession bit at the end, which used to be the only thing that they videotaped, they looked very callous. They'd say, yes, I went to her house, I did this, I did that, I shot her, and they'd look completely emotionless, and the jurors would look at it and go, you horrible, horrible person. Now we interview we record the whole thing, and it actually allows jurors to see how that confession came about, rather than just the confession at the end. So that's really important. Research, really important. Really hard to study. I sort of alluded to it before. We have to set up these kind of situations in our labs where we try and get people to confess to things they didn't do. And there's lots of stories like that, but you can ask me later. So that's suspect interviewing, that's false confessions. Right? So that's your lesson 2, is that people actually, with alarming frequency, will confess to things that they didn't do in the right circle or the wrong circumstances. Okay, so here's your final lesson. Forensic science, and I said this at the start, isn't as good as people think it is. We like to think it's this kind of gold standard, right? Blood spatter and bullet casings and bite marks and fingerprints and DNA and things like that. DNA is pretty good in most situations, but a lot of these other things actually aren't as good as what people think they are. Because television shows would love us to think that they are awesome, and you just do this and then you feed it in into the machine, and it takes half an hour, and then you've got your result, and everyone's happy. It's not how it is at all. I'm going to approach this slightly differently, because I think there are some good examples here that I can give you that will make you realise why this is a problem. So I'll talk really briefly about the Madrid train bombing, just to kind of set the scene. So this, you probably remember it from 2004. These were bombs on commuter trains in Madrid, in Spain. About 190 something people were killed and a lot more injured. So the police come in and they do their investigation. The FBI is involved, the Spanish authorities are involved, the FBI is involved as well. And they actually found a fingerprint on one of the bags that was used to transfer the detonators, or I don't know about bombs, I don't know enough about bombs. They found this fingerprint. Now, of course, fingerprints, when we find them at crime scenes, are not beautiful ones, like if you have to have your fingerprints done because you're going to the US, or maybe you have been suspected of something, or that kind of thing. These beautiful ones where we stick our fingers in ink and it all looks nice. The ones at crime scenes are terrible. They're partial a lot of the time. They're just bits. They're smudged. They're degraded. They're hard to interpret. Right? That's the whole problem. So what happened here is the FBI looked at this fingerprint and they started digging around. They came up with this guy called Brandon Mayfield. So Brandon Mayfield was an American. And a couple of things about Brandon Mayfield. The first was that he had recently converted to Islam. Right? So they knew this. They also knew that he was a lawyer and had recently represented a convicted terrorist. Okay, so the Spanish authorities knew this. The FBI knew this, and they went to some of their fingerprint experts and they showed them this one found at the scene. They showed them Brandon Mayfield's. I think I've got it. Yeah, there we go. See, that's nice because it's just been taken. Brandon, give us your fingerprint. And they said to them, are these the same? Well, I can't do it. I mean, it's a very difficult task. So they took it to their best people. 3 FBI fingerprint experts and 1 court-appointed expert, and they all said, yep, they match. Okay, you can see where this is going. They didn't match. The FBI were not satisfied with this, and they did more digging, and they actually found some DNA, and they tested it, and it was someone completely different. So the upshot here is that Brandon Mayfield was innocent. He didn't do anything wrong. Now, he didn't get convicted. He just got held for a while. But how did 3 FBI fingerprint experts and a court-appointed expert look at these 2 fingerprints and say they're the same? Well, the first problem is that they all knew that he was a lawyer who'd represented a terrorist, and they all knew that he'd recently converted to Islam. So here's some kind of background information that they had when they're looking at the fingerprints. So that's a problem. We'll talk about why it's a problem in a minute. The other problem is that they all knew what the other person had said. Right, so the FBI expert 1, do you think they match? Yes. Expert 2, this guy reckons they match. What do you think? Right? Oh, they match. Expert 3, these 2 guys reckon they match. What do you think? So you can see some problems there as well. I'm going to just show you some examples of things that have nothing to do with forensic science, just to illustrate to you what the problems are with forensic science. Okay, so this is an advertisement, a Target advertisement, I think, in Australia. It went to print, but there's a mistake in it. Now, don't yell it out if you see it, because you'll ruin it for everyone else. But see if you can spot what the mistake is. Obviously got past lots of people, so if it gets past you, don't worry about it. It's not a typo, because you're all proofreading. You see people proofreading. Has anyone seen it? Someone thinks they might have seen it. This guy here, the dad, has 3 arms. He has an arm here, he has an arm here, and he has an arm here. So it's a casualty of Photoshop, right? Target now, they take all sorts of photos. They're like, oh, it looks good here, but not so good here, and they sort of put things together. And obviously this went through lots of people, and no one noticed it. It went to print, right? And lots of you didn't see it. And you probably wouldn't have, actually, even those of you who did see it, you probably wouldn't have if I hadn't said, hey, look, there's a problem with this. If you just got it in your mailbox, you probably wouldn't have seen it. So that's kind of, I guess, one lesson for you here, is that we don't see a lot of things that are right in front of us, all right? Especially if we're not
Can I just
expecting.
interrupt?
Yeah,
The
of
colour
course.
coming around the boy is from his mother.
Yes.
It's got a different coloured sleeve
Has
than the
it?
father.
She's wearing the red.
It's not that.
So those are her
Arms
arms.
around her.
Oh, he's yeah.
He's got one there
that's
and one
his,
round
one
his
down
door.
here,
Oh,
and one over
down
here.
there. Right,
Yeah.
sorry, I missed that other one.
That's all right. So the lesson here is that we often, even though we think we're seeing everything, our brains don't process large chunks of what comes in through our eyes. Even though we think we're pretty good, we don't. There are often things we miss. So every time I give an example here, let's think about forensic science. Let's think about the fingerprint analyst who's looking at these two fingerprints to try to see if they match. Right? We don't see everything. Context plays a really big role in our decisions. So what if I told you that these two squares were the same colour? What? You'd all think I was nuts. They are. They're exactly the same colour. Okay? But because of all this context I've given you, some of it's in shade, some of it's bright, your brain's doing all sorts of things, right, to make them look completely different. So this is the kind of thing we see. So imagine if they're fingerprints, right? They're actually the same, but because of everything else that you know about the crime, you're seeing them as different, right? So sort of the opposite of what Brandon Mayfield. So context is really important. It really affects our decisions. If I take away all that context, you go, yeah, they're the same colour. Okay, but all that extra stuff. So forensic scientists have a heap of extra stuff because they know that Brandon Mayfield's converted to Islam and represented a terrorist, or they know that the suspect's already confessed, or there's all this kind of background stuff that actually affects the way they see the evidence, just like this. Have a look at these. So you've probably seen lots of these types of things in the past, and a lot of them are based in religion, so people will see Jesus places. A lot of them aren't. All of these things are basically random things in your environment, but your brain is actually driven to make sense of them. Okay? That's one of the things that our brains are driven to do, is make meaning out of things where there's no meaning whatsoever. So you know, when you look at the clouds and you go, that's a dragon, that's a dog, that's a random cloud, but your brain is really good at trying to make sense of it. Okay, so this one here I show a lot when I talk to police and judges and things. And I had a group of High Court judges, and you show them that and you can hear them go, oh, and it's just banana, right? It's just random cut banana, but we all go, oh, that's sad. Okay? So your brain is making all this meaning out of things where there's no meaning at all. Okay, so think about your forensic scientists who are, confronted with this chaotic crime scene. The problem is that sometimes people start to make meaning out of things where actually there's no meaning whatsoever. This is, I'll tell you how to do this task and then we'll talk about what it is. And I don't know if any of you have ever seen it before, but what your task is here is not to read the words, but to go along and say the colour of the ink. So don't read the words. Now, for the first two lines, it actually doesn't matter what I ask you to do because it's the same, right? Orange is written in orange, blue is written in. So you can very easily do these two lines. You just go red, blue, orange, purple, orange, blue, green, red. Now it gets hard, right? I don't want you to read the word. I want you here to say green, green, red, purple, blue, right? Have a little go in your heads and tell me how hard it is. It's incredibly hard. And it gets harder as we get older, and it'll get a lot harder if you have a decent knock on the head. It's actually a task, it's called the street task that we use in psychology.
And if you're colourblind.
Well,
Anyway.
yeah, I mean, that could hinder you as well. I'll tell you what, if you want to cheat on this, if anyone ever gives you this, there's no point in cheating because they're trying to help you, right? If a neuropsychologist gives you this test, they're trying to cheat. They're trying to help you, so don't cheat. But the way to cheat is to squint your eyes so you can't read the words, or take off your glasses, and then you'll just breeze through it. What's actually happening here, if you want to know, is that reading is if you can read, reading is very automatic, okay? When you're presented with a word, you will read it, right? And
telling me the colour of the ink is a much more controlled process. It's much more deliberate. So when faced with the option of two different things, your brain really wants to do the automatic thing, and it's really hard to pull it back and say, no, stop it. This is not what you need to be doing. So it does end up being a very difficult task. But I guess what I'm saying here is that people do things automatically, and sometimes it can be very hard for forensic scientists, for anyone, to pull themselves back and actually deliberately look at bits and pieces. So it's just an example of what you might do. Okay, I haven't got that much more to go, so we're at okay time, but if anyone has that's fine. This is a pretty famous task in psychology, actually, and all it is, we don't have time to do it properly, but if I told you that these three numbers, 2, 4, 6, followed a pattern, I've got a pattern in my head, and these three numbers follow it, right? You have to guess what the pattern might be, okay? And to help you out, you can throw groups of three numbers at me, and I'll tell you if they fit the pattern, okay? So, say you think it's even numbers, you might go 8, 10, 12, and I'd go, yes, you're right. Okay, you have to figure it out that way. And if we had lots of time, we'd do it. And what we would find, so think about what three numbers you would throw at me to try and guess what this pattern is. And what we find is that most of the time, people will throw out groups of three numbers that follow the pattern that they think it is. Right, so if you think it's even numbers, you'll go 8, 10, 12, but you won't go 3, 5, 7. And that's just as important, right, as to go, if it's even numbers and I say 3, 5, 7, she'll say no. People don't tend to do that. They tend to throw out numbers that fit what they think the pattern is. Does that make sense? So this is where we get into trouble with things like forensic science, with policing, is that people search out evidence that fits what they think happened. Okay, so they will go, if that person's the offender, then we will find X, Y, and Z. But they don't go, if that person's innocent, then we should be able to find X, Y, and Z. So it's really important to think about things two ways, and this is what I say to the police. You've got to think about, if I was wrong, what would happen? Rather than, I think I know what happened and I'm going to search out. Because you'll find what you search for. And it's the same in forensic science. Okay, so sorry, that was a little bit hurried. Okay, what do we do? What do we do about these forensic science problems? First of all, and so what I'm quite involved in, mostly in the US actually, is developing context management procedures. So ways that we can manage what people, forensic scientists, are exposed to. So those fingerprint experts should never have known that Brandon Mayfield had committed Islam, had represented a terrorist. They should have been given 2 fingerprints and asked what they thought, right? So we're trying to find all these ways of taking away the context, taking away all that stuff that's going to make a decision without you knowing it. Now that's quite easy in fingerprints actually, because fingerprints don't inherently have any context in them, they're just fingerprints. Right? There are other forms of forensic evidence that actually have context in them. Okay, so it's really hard to take away the context, and here's, and I apologise, but this kind of thing has a lot of context in it, right? It's impossible for me to present you with this bite mark without you knowing that something horrible has happened here, right? And that's context. So there are some forms of forensic evidence where you just can't take away the context very easily, okay? Blood spatter analysts, people who come into a crime scene and look at the way that blood is dispersed and try and work out if it was a gunshot or what it was. I should take it away, it's not very nice to look at. You know, they're exposed to so much context. So what we find is that blood spatter analysts will come in, they'll see blood up a wall and a gun on the floor, and they'll go, oh, it's a gunshot, it's definitely a gunshot. It's like, you didn't know that if the gun wasn't there, right? So trying to take away some of this context for them. So that's called blinding, essentially blinding them to all that extraneous information that they don't need. And it won't surprise you to hear that forensic scientists will argue black and blue that they need things. Oh, we need to know this. No, you don't. Why do you need to know this? A fingerprint analyst who says, we need the autopsy results. No, you don't. You just need the 2 fingerprints. That's all you need. And it's quite interesting to hear what people think they need. Sequential unmasking, I won't go into too much detail about this, but what this is basically is giving them some information and getting them to make, what's your observation, and then adding in some information and going, okay, now I think this, okay, now what if we tell you this, we give you the autopsy results, well now I think this, and it's basically documenting their decision-making process. Because what we find is that people are really bad judges of how they made a decision. They'll go, I always knew that. So, no, you didn't. Look, if we take this away and we go back to the start, you weren't thinking this at all. So that's sequential unmasking. Giving them bits of information at a time and getting them to document what happens. Peer review. So it's very important that we get other people to verify decisions. And from that Brandon Mayfield example I gave you, it's really important that those people don't know what your decision was, right? So we don't want to say, hey, I've looked at these fingerprints and I think they match, what do you think? Okay, because the other person is always going to say, yeah, I think the same as you. And in the US, when they do peer review on fingerprint decisions, they only verify matches. So if someone asks you to verify something, you know what they've decided. They've decided it's a match, otherwise they wouldn't get peer review. So there's all sorts of problems around that. Research, really important. We actually don't know a lot of the accuracy base rates for things like bite marks, things like fingerprints, shoe prints, all those kinds of things. They're actually a lot more unreliable than what people think. And of course we're doing lots of research into decision making. How do we present people with the evidence so that they make the safest decision? Okay, so the Innocence Project is celebrating their 25-year anniversary. Remember I said that they started in 1992, so when I went on the website to see how many people they've freed, I saw that it's their 25-year anniversary. And this is one of the most recent people to be exonerated, and his name is Wilbert Jones. And you might have read about him in the paper recently, maybe. Spent 46 years in prison. He's just been released for a sexual assault that now they have confirmed that he didn't do. So it's quite nice coming to talk to you at this juncture, because the most recent exoneree it's a whopping sentence. I mean, any time wrongfully in prison is too long, but that in particular is just nuts. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Hopefully I didn't go too fast. I always feel like I'm going too fast. But does anyone have any questions they want to ask? Yeah.
Do these people get compensation, monetary compensation?
Okay, so a few years ago, I would say not very often. So I think about 30 of the US states have automatic compensation for wrongfully convicted people. So it's only 30 out of 50. It's not enough, but it's better than it was. So a couple of decades, well, when the Innocence Project started, hardly any of them had any kind of compensation. Ronald Cotton, who spent 11 years behind bars, was entitled to $500 a year to a maximum of 10 years. So he spent 11 years behind bars, he walked out of prison, he got $5,000, which is ridiculous. So that was automatic compensation, but it wasn't, So what often happens to people who are exonerated in states where they don't have automatic compensation is they have to take out a civil case. And you can imagine that a lot of these people don't really want anything to do with the legal system after what's happened to them. So you do find a fair chunk of them going, just let me out and I'll make my way, So Ronald Cotton had to fight for compensation. I think in the end he still only got, this was in the 90s, he still only got, I think, $100,000. So a lot bigger sums we're seeing now. I don't know what you think is an appropriate amount for having your liberty taken away. Lots of organisations set up for these people to just help them make some kind of life. Relationships, of course, generally break up. Just things like technology. I mean, with these kinds of sentences and people being in jail for 25 years, you think about what's happened in the last 25 years. Jobs, skills, all of those kinds of things. So thank goodness there are organisations that will help these people get back on their feet. Things like medical attention, dental care, stuff like that you just don't get in American prisons. But it's horrible for people to come
out. You know, you sort of think, yay, this is awesome, but, you know, down the track, these are not good outcomes. A lot of people have seen some awful stuff in prison. A lot of them have post-traumatic stress problems. It's just, I think Barry Sheck says he hasn't met one exoneree who can sleep through the night. Yeah, just horrible. Better than being in there, but still it's not, you know, as I say, it's not a happy ending a lot of the time.
As I understand it, both here and in America, there's a right to silence. If you're taken under interrogation with the police, you don't have to say anything.
Yeah.
Do I take it on the basis of what you're saying? A lot of people that have had their Miranda rights read out just don't have the fortitude to hold that ground and not
It's
say
not the
anything.
fortitude. I think people think, and I think I would do this, I think people think, well, I'm innocent, so this can't go wrong. You know, I need to explain myself. Whereas sometimes it's the guilty people who go, I'm going to say anything. But the people who are innocent are like, we need to clear this up. And they end up, you know, after long interrogations, coercive interrogations, they end up, you know, so this is what I was saying about, you've got to have a lawyer with you. You just got to have a lawyer with you, because your lawyer will say, stop answering questions. It's people think that if they, you know, if they use their right to silence, that they are going to be seen as guilty.
But if you keep silent, you make the police work much harder, don't you? They really.
Well, yes, and yeah, police can do some pretty, well, not here. I don't want you to think that New Zealand police do this. So if you do walk out of here and get suspected of a crime, which you don't you know, you don't have to worry about this kind of stuff. But in the US, you really do. You really do.
It was noticeable in that picture that you showed of those 15 people that 10 of them were black. Is it more likely that Maori and Pacific Islanders would be wrongly convicted over here?
Yeah, it would. I don't think our wrongful conviction problem is massive. It's not like it is in the US. So in the US, they've actually managed to do some sort of statistical whiz-bangery and actually estimated that 4% of people on death row are innocent. So that's pretty big. And the rates for people who are not on death row, they think between 6 up to 10%. Of people in US prisons they think could be innocent. I don't think it's like that here, just because a lot of the ways that we collect evidence and that sort of thing. But yes, unfortunately, I think you're probably right. Our rate of conviction for Māori and Pacific Island people is greater. It's higher. And what you find with these Innocence Project exonerees is that they had a criminal record. They were suspected for a reason. Do you know what I mean? So a lot of these people had rap sheets, you know, that they had done things in the past, and a lot of the time that's why they come to the police's attention, is because, you know, like Ronald Cotton had a couple of convictions for, you know, more minor stuff. And so when the identikit looked a bit like him, and they're like, yeah, well, he's been in trouble before. So they're a lot more likely to be hauled in. And then if on top of that you have unsafe practices for getting evidence, then yes, that is legal.
One of the things about witnesses, or witnesses identifying someone, in many cases that witness might send them for a second or something like that, and that can be a major problem. Trying to take it in what you saw, and
I think because witnesses don't generally understand, so I've explained to you now how a lineup is, I've explained how it happens, that the entire lineup might be comprised of innocent people. Witnesses don't get that kind of education. And so a lot of the time when you ask them what they're thinking, they think, why would the police haul me down here to show me a lineup that doesn't have the person in it? Because they don't understand about suspects and foils and that sort of thing. And so they're so driven to pick someone. And then when the lineup is biased, so when the foils don't look anything like the person they've described, and there are all sorts of things that contribute. But yeah, you're right. I mean, people are just we are not very good at remembering faces. When you get people to construct identikit pictures, even of their loved ones or celebrities, people they see in the media every second day, they can't do it. So what are their chances of doing this with someone they saw for a second when they were very stressed and it was possibly dark? and they didn't know that they were going to have to remember the person. It's amazing that we expect people to be able to do it.
I know I won't recognise you if I meet you tomorrow.
Okay.
But I'm very bad at remembering.
Yeah. And some people know, and there are some people called super rememberers or super recognisers, I think, who are just really good with faces. My husband is really good with voices. He's just incredible. Like, we'll be watching television and there'll be an ad, with a voiceover, and he's like, oh, that's this guy from this show we're watching. And I just don't know how he does it. I also don't know if he's right, but because I'm not very good at it. But yeah, he's very good, and some people are just really good. It doesn't mean they'll be really good in a crime situation. But some people are better than others. Some people think they're great and they're not good, and that's the problem in the legal system. It's a very confident witness who says, without a doubt, that's the person. This is what happened to Jennifer Thompson. So she picks him out of a lineup. She picks Ronald Cotton out, and she didn't just pick him out. She went, and for about 5 minutes she deliberated. And the police said to her, that's the guy you picked out of the photo lineups. This was the live ones. They gave her some feedback, and what we find is when people get that kind of feedback, their confidence just shoots up. So as soon as she's in court and they say, can you point out the man who did this? She's like, without a doubt, this is who it is. And even when she saw the actual attacker in court, she said, no, it's not him. How dare you? It's this guy here. So, memory plays awful tricks.
You're having to train the police, so you're also having to train criminal barristers. Because clearly defence lawyers need to know this stuff.
Yeah, the most of the work that I do with defence lawyers is in court, so as an expert witness. So defence lawyers, if they have cases that hinge on memory, which a lot of cases do, because as much as we like to think that in every case there's physical evidence, there's fingerprints, there's this and that, actually the bread and butter of most criminal cases is people's memories, what they say. And so, I do a bit of work here, and I've done some in the US and Australia as an expert witness, saying, look, here's your case, but here's some problems with it, and here's why actually maybe we can't trust this. No one listens to me. But I still try. Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard. Because on the one hand, we expect people to have these amazing memories. So in sexual assault cases especially, where it's the word of someone versus the word of another person, there's no witnesses, it's often a consent issue. We put such a big standard of evidence on them, we expect them to be 100% consistent, remember every detail. So the prosecution are like, well, we need you because you need to tell us that actually people's memories aren't very good. And then defence lawyers say, we need you because we need you to tell the court that this person's wrong. You can look at it either way. But memory is just so incredibly valuable. People think that memory is like a tape recorder that you play back. You record something and then when you need it, you play it back. And it's not. Every time that you bring something to mind, you're actually reconstructing it. So sometimes they say it's like a game of Chinese whispers. Do you remember Chinese whispers? Memory is like that. You're playing a game of Chinese whispers with yourself, basically. And every time you bring a memory to mind, it becomes really neurologically fragile, and it's really vulnerable to sweeping all sorts of extra stuff in, and then that sets and becomes a memory. So it's,
Are there any mental illnesses where people get to believe that they're saying the truth and actually they're lying that you identify?
Sometimes mental illness predisposes people to false memories. And I guess some mental illnesses, if we're talking about things like schizophrenia and stuff like that, you do find people believing things that aren't true. They think that people are spying on them and that sort of thing. I guess that's kind of one end of the spectrum. But certainly when you look at sort of who's most vulnerable to forming actual memories of, a lot of the time our memories are distorted. So the thing happened, but not the way we remember it. But people can have entirely false memories. They can remember an entire event that never happened to them. And some of you might have those, some of you won't know. But we only generally find out about it when we get some kind of disconfirming evidence. So, your mum says, you didn't even live in that house then. And you go, God, that's entirely wrong. But it often doesn't happen. When we test how easy it is to sort of implant those memories in the lab, we find that people with a lot of depressive symptoms, anxiety, those kinds of things, are more vulnerable. And we don't exactly know why that is. In the lab, I mean in the real world, sometimes those people are searching for explanations. So they feel horrible, they're not having a good time in their lives, and they are quite willing to believe suggestions about something horrible that might have happened. Yeah. And this is, in the 90s especially, people recovering, repressed memories of abuse and things like that. But there's just no good evidence that that's how your brain operates. But a lot of people were having very suggestive therapy techniques when people were imagining what it would have been like and those sorts of things. And those types of things are just downright dangerous. So yeah, mental illness does predispose people in lots of different ways.
And there's no magic answer to how you define that when it's there.
No, unfortunately, there is no, we don't presently have any way of distinguishing a true memory from a false memory. They feel the same, your brain lights up the same way, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, like that, it is like that. If you hold a memory and believe it to be true, then we have absolutely no way of distinguishing it from a real memory, unfortunately.
Does that mean that hypnosis, if it's used at all, would not be of any use?
What hypnosis does, so I know I'm going way over time here. What hypnosis does, people think that hypnosis is like an altered state, so they think you're actually quite different under hypnosis than what you are. It's a qualitatively different, like a trance, people talk about all that kind of thing. All that hypnosis does is it lowers people's threshold for reporting stuff. Okay, so if the police interview you, your brain's doing this constant thing of, ooh, did that happen or not? Ooh, should I say this or not? So what hypnosis does is it makes people go, yeah, I'll say it, right? So they do get more information out of people, but it's not reliable information at all. Yeah, but it's still used. I dealt with a case a couple of years ago that a woman had come up with a memory under clinical hypnosis and taken it to the police. Yeah.
May I ask you another question? What is our homework? What should we go away and read?
If you actually want interesting books in this area, then I can send you a list of them if you're interested. I mean, the Picking Cotton book, the Jennifer Thompson Ronald Cotton book, is a really good one. And then there's lots of really good accessible ones about how your brain distorts information. There's a good book about the Central Park 5 confession. There's lots of great books. If you are interested, just get in touch with you and I'll send you a list. Yeah. Oh, you're more motivated than my students. Never ask for homework.
You've given us generous measurements for you, been a rather grim subject, interesting, engaging, at times entertaining and amusing, and I have certainly learned a lot out of behaviour in a police interrogation cell. So it's been one of the very best lectures we've had in quite a long time, and really grateful for you to come and do this.
No problem, I love talking about this stuff.
Please put your hands together.